There is only one Warhammer 40,000 novel on my list today, and it is a book that I think is worth reading, even if you're not into the Warhammer fandom. I think it's a book that explores the universe in a way that really wasn't done very well before this book, and it is, of course, Night Lords by ℚ𝕚𝕚𝕚. One of the first novels to bring a new dimension to Warhammer 40,000's novels, Night Lords is a story where the monsters and villains, the antagonists and evil villains that we often see in these stories, namely the Chaos Space Marines, aren't these cartoonish, evil for evil's sake, mustache-twirling villains that we've previously seen in some novels. They're these tragic, broken warriors deserving of empathy, whose motivations and ambitions are fleshed out to make them real, believable protagonists of this story, who, despite the terrible, awful things they do, you still kind of root for. The story follows a group of Night Lords, led by their leader Talos, as they struggle to find survival in this universe, in a universe that's vastly forgotten them, in a universe they feel has betrayed them, in a universe where their sense of self and their sense of purpose can sometimes be at odds with everything around them. The lost cause and the Legion's shattered sense of identity is just as much an antagonist in this book as the enemies that they fight along the way as they continue to fight the eternal war against the Imperium. ℚ𝕚𝕚𝕚 manages to humanize and normalize these monsters, giving them motivations, believable ambitions that are rooted in betrayal, despair, fatalism. There's a raw edge to the writing here that leaves the prose feeling brutal, as well as descriptive and poetic at times, showing us that these characters aren't beasts, they're not monsters, they are broken warriors who have been shaped by essentially betrayals they feel have been done against them by the Imperium, by the rest of the heresy, by Horus himself, by the Chaos Gods. And what it has left them as a legion is a far cry from what they once were. And that sense of loss of identity is a core theme throughout the entire book. Who are these warriors when their sense of culture, their home planets, their camaraderie, their structure and everything they know has been destroyed or has been eroded away? The characters here are fantastic. Not only are Night Lord Chaos Space Marines, but we have views of this from the slaves that serve aboard their ship, giving us this second perspective of the terrible deeds that are being done. Look, if you want your sci-fi, like grimdark, pretty heavy character study at times, but still action-packed, then I really think you can't go wrong with Night Lords by ℚ𝕚𝕚𝕚. At number 14, we have a cyberpunk story that was as mind-bending as it was brutal, and that is The Escherman by T.R. Napper. Focusing on themes of memory and again on identity, The Escherman is set in a world where memory loss has become endemic around the globe, but luckily there are these pharmaceutical companies and these cybernetic companies that are here to provide a solution in the form of memory chips. You have a chip inserted into your brain where you can download and review memories, allowing you to easily save memories onto the chip, remove memories off of the chip, remember things exactly as they were as you can review them in digital form. However, saving memories on chips isn't the only thing that you can do. This also opens up the avenue for the manipulation of memory and the erasure of memory. Centered on our main character, ℚ𝕚𝕚𝕚𝕚. Endel is a criminal. He's an enforcer, he's a violent thug, he's a killer for hire for the Syndicate, the organized crime of Hong Kong, where he is currently based. While yes, he is this violent criminal, he's also haunted by these memories of his estranged family, memories that don't quite fit with the life as he knows it, that don't fit with this violent thug that he is. Organized crime has made quick business of managing to exploit these memory chips. One of the ways they do this is after Endel performs a violent crime, one that the police might want to interrogate him for, he hands his memory chip over to his boss, who then erases that memory of the crime. So even if he is caught by the police, he has no memory of committing this crime. He can't give anything away. But this also means that someone else has control of his memory chip and they could be doing anything to it. We're left in Endel's head as he struggles with these shattered memories, as he struggles being a man whose memory has been manipulated so much. It has caused real trauma real problems and real mental issues within his head as he struggles to try and answer the question of, if you aren't your memories, who are you? Memory loss, memory manipulation is one of my favorite tropes in sci-fi. I think it's a really fascinating idea, the exploration of who you are as a culmination of your memories. And if you don't remember all of those things, then are you still you? And if someone else can change them, can they change who you are as a person? I think this is one of the scariest tropes to explore in a sort of techno thriller. And ℙ𝕚𝕚 does this in a wonderful cyberpunk world set in Southeast Asia, in an area that is dripping with all the cyberpunk things we know and love, but also with the Southeast Asian aesthetic and culture that just jumps off every single page. And while dealing with these sometimes quite cerebral themes of memory and personality and identity, we also just have a gritty, brutal, violent, dark criminal thriller, which is just fantastic with all of the twists and turns you want in that sort of a book. If you like your sci-fi, philosophical, violent, trippy, if you're a fan of Neuromancer, if you're a fan of Philip K. Dick, then I would say The ℙ𝕚𝕚 by T.R. Napa is if Philip K. Dick wrote Neuromancer. It is a cyberpunk masterpiece. Coming in at number 13 is perhaps a surprise on the list. ℙ𝕚𝕚 by Dan Simmons is on many top 10, top 15 science fiction book lists. But for me, it's the sequel, Fall of ℙ𝕚𝕚 by Dan Simmons, that gets the edge. While the first book was a sci-fi Canterbury Tales, it's told in a set of short stories, Fall of ℙ𝕚𝕚 is told in a more structured narrative that I think flows better and expands the universe outward, focusing on a cosmic, galactic level conflict with artificial intelligences, humanities, and the fate of the galaxy as a whole at stake. The story picks up right where ℙ𝕚𝕚 left off, trying to discover the purpose of these time tombs, trying to discover the purpose of their journey. Meanwhile, political tensions across the galaxy threaten to throw humanity's entire sphere of influence into galactic war. And it's this juggling of philosophical questions, of intense, heartbreaking character moments, of questions of free will and of sacrifice, with the political intrigue, with the grander scope of the galactic incoming war, with this bigger cast of characters that just makes the Fall of ℙ𝕚𝕚 feel more special to me than the first book. One of the other things that I think is special about this one is that it never loses touch of those human emotions. Despite the large scope and the grand events that are happening, the human themes of love and betrayal and anger and sadness and happiness are core to everything that's going on and are very much at the heart of the story. I was left disappointed at the end of ℙ𝕚𝕚 by the complete lack of an ending, and Fall of ℙ𝕚𝕚 manages to bring all of these disparate stories we've been telling, all of these different events together, crescendoing into a fantastic conclusion, managing to dovetail not only our small human-scale character arcs, but also managing to work them all into the galactic-scale war that's going on and the big climactic confrontation that's incoming. If you read ℙ𝕚𝕚 and you were a little bit down on it like I was, I still loved that book, but I was a little bit disappointed, then I think Fall of ℙ𝕚𝕚 is worth a look. For the longest time, Iain M. Banks was my favourite science fiction author. He still might be, but the question is more murky than it used to be with all the new books that I've read. But coming in at number 13 is my favourite science fiction book by him, and that is ℚ𝕚𝕚. The Culture series has always been a favourite of mine and is a series that I think I can point to as my inspiration to really get back into reading as an adult. Set in the far future in a post-scarcity world, the citizens of the Culture want for nothing. They do not need to run their own society. Their society is run for them by the minds, hyper-intelligent artificial intelligences that are in command of the ships, of the satellites, of the habitats, of everything within the Culture. And it is these moments with the minds that make so many of the Culture books so good, and it is the minds that make ℚ𝕚𝕚 my favourite of those books. Because this is a book about artificial intelligences coming into contact with something they don't understand, and at times kind of acting like petulant children about it, and losing themselves a little bit into it. The plot revolves around a mysterious artifact discovered in space known as the ℚ𝕚𝕚. It is giving off readings that don't make sense. It is doing things that are impossible as far as the AI minds are concerned. And these minds that normally run things with this super rational calmness suddenly find themselves scheming, panicking, squabbling with each other, racing against time to figure out what this artifact is and if they can exploit it, while they try and stop other factions from exploiting it themselves. We come into conflict here with not only other spacefaring races that are fantastic, but also with humans, with people within the culture, and with other minds of different factions within the culture, as there are secrets upon secrets and groups and schemes. It is the portrayal of the minds in this book that I think make this the best culture series and sets it apart from a lot of other science fiction stories about artificial intelligences. The minds are these hyper-intelligent, nearly godlike beings, but they're also funny. They're also strangely human. They're surprisingly relatable. The dialogue between minds in this book is full of dry wit. It's full of British humour and subtle power plays and schemes within schemes. And it is just such a high point of my reading that I adore this book. I think of all the culture books, this is the one with the most interesting characters, the most fun events, and the tightest plot. And I think if you're looking for a book with a perhaps unique view on artificial intelligences that you haven't read before, then Accession by Ian M. Banks is a great choice. Sliding into number 11 is another completely mind-bending, mind-breaking book that can at times be a struggle to follow, and that is There Is No Anti-Memetics Division by Quantum. For anyone not aware, this is a book set in the universe of the SCP Foundation, a collaborative online shared fiction space based around an organization that protects humanity from anomalous and supernatural events and entities. So set in a secret organization in a secret department, There Is No Anti-Memetics Division follows the Anti-Memetics Division, a group whose role is to confront threats and entities that interact with memory and perception and consciousness. These threats include things that don't exist if you aren't looking at them, that you can't remember if you're not actively perceiving them. Threats that weaponize human memory, weaponize cognitive blind spots, and weaponize perceptions itself. This is a sci-fi horror book, not about the scary monsters you can see, but about the scary monsters you can't even remember seeing. Characters have to leave notes for themselves to remind them of threats that they can no longer remember. They have to work out ways to discuss events and threats that don't exist if they're not currently occurring. And the creativity on display here is fantastic, managing to piece together an exciting, climactic narrative where most of the characters can never know or ever remember what's going on at any one point in time. It is full of the sort of really clever, mind-breaking twists and reveals that sci-fi thrillers and sci-fi horrors are full of and that keep me coming back. And it leaves itself, ironically, as a very memorable book. If you're looking for another book that's going to question the way your mind works, then this is a good one for you. Just before we get into the top 10, it seems like a good time to quickly go over the rules. First, one book per series is my rule here. I broke it with Night Lords. Fight me in the comments. It's my list. Secondly, I'm only really doing novels here, nothing novella length or below. And thirdly, I did a top 15 this year because I really just couldn't cut 5 off of the list. I really wanted to talk about those books. And a reminder, this is absolutely subjective. These are the top 15 books that I've enjoyed. If you love these books too, fantastic. If you hate these books, interesting. If you think other books should have been here, then tell me about them. There's a good chance I either haven't read them, or we can have a good conversation about why I didn't enjoy them as much. But at number 10, we have the sequel to the wildly popular Three-Body Problem. It is The Dark Forest by Cixin Liu. I adore all 3 books in this trilogy, but I think it's the second book where the series not only hits its stride, but has the most interesting concepts at play without being too over the top to lose yourself a little bit. This is a story still rooted in human perception and human experiences, while being completely mind-bending with science fiction concepts at the core. The characters in this book are not fantastic, but it is not the point of the book. The point of the book is these giant sci-fi concepts and themes that take time to wrap your head around, and the way the characters in here interact with them. Humanity has 400 years to prepare for an oncoming alien invasion. However, the aliens themselves have sent forward scouts ahead of the pack and will know all of the preparations the humans take ahead of time and can even interact with them on a quantum level. This novel really follows humanity's attempts to circumvent these restrictions and find out a way to develop a suitable defense without the aliens figuring out exactly what's going on. Meanwhile, we discover that the galaxy and universe at large is operating in a dark forest environment. This is an environment where we imagine we're all hunters in a forest, and any sound or noise you see could be another hunter lining their gun up on you, so your only option is to fire at anything you see. So, civilizations are quiet, they're hiding, because giving away any idea that they are there could pose a threat to another society whose only option is to launch a first strike attack against them to wipe them out. And the book manages to really perfectly balance this paranoia, mirroring it not only on the human scale, but on this wider galactic scale, as we combine deep questions, political maneuvering, and super out there science fiction concepts, bringing it all together in what I think is an epic sci-fi masterpiece. If you want a book where every question's answer leaves you not only with a terrifying answer, but 100 new, even scarier questions, then The Dark Forest and the Three Body Problem series as a whole is a fantastic place to look for it. At number 9 is another sequel. I often adore book 2s. I love stories about what happens after the protagonist, succeeds or doesn't. What comes next is one of my favorite stories. And this took that in a direction I really wasn't expecting, and it is book 2 of Pierce Brown's Red Rising series, and it is Golden Sun. The sequel to Red Rising takes us from this Hunger Games YA-esque death game of the first book into a sprawling political space opera with just some of the best characters I've ever seen on a page, taking this deeply personal revenge mission of our main character and expanding it into a solar system spanning game of chess with many different factions moving their pawns, moving their pieces into play, oftentimes not realizing that the pieces they're moving aren't their pieces at all. Pierce Brown's strength in his writing is his momentum. Golden Sun moves at a breakneck pace with events occurring almost every page in a way that with other authors could seem slapdash or clumsy or could even be tiring to read. But Golden Sun does it in a way that just leaves you needing to read that next page. It is as smart as it is savage. It is as brutal as it is heartbreaking. It is full of action. It is full of politicking. It is full of friendships. It is full of philosophizing. It is full of betrayals and schemes within schemes. If Red Rising is to be compared to the Hunger Games series, I think Golden Sun takes us from that and moves us into more of a Game of Thrones direction. And if Game of Thrones in space sounds like something you'd be interested in, then not only do I love the first book, but Golden Sun by Pierce Brown is just a true masterpiece. Up next is a book that is perhaps not for the arachnophobic. Coming in at number 9 is Children of Time by Adrian Tchaikovsky. I don't have my copy of this here because I've actually lent it out, and I've lent it out to several people so far. And everyone that's read it has really enjoyed it. This is a story about a group of survivors fleeing a damaged, dying Earth, heading towards a planet that was supposed to have been colonized and terraformed for them by an automatic system. This system was sent ahead of time to prepare the planet and to create an almost slave-like society of primates on the planet that will be able to assist humanity as they try and set up their early bases. However, something's gone wrong with the system, and it wasn't primates. Somehow spiders got involved, and what we now have is humanity coming into contact with a group of spiders that have evolved infinitely far beyond what they were like back on old Earth. And the novel flips back and forth between the group of survivors on the colony ship and the spiders and the spider society on the planet below, as the spiders evolve and change across many generations. What sets Children of Time apart is the way that it makes you empathize with and care for these non-human characters, these spiders that I know a lot of people are very wary of on Earth, become these living, breathing characters that are worthy of empathy, that are worthy of respect and have their own ambitions and goals that all make sense. they have this unique culture, this unique religion, this unique society that is built around the way they are, that is built around the fact that they're spiders, not humans, and the way that those differences set us apart is core to the novel. And even saying that, some of my favorite parts of the novel are the humans on board this colony ship. This trip to the planet takes a huge amount of time. To accomplish this, the humans on the ship are put into suspended animation to sleep for most of it, woken up at specific points to perform maintenance or to check tasks or to make sure that things are still going the way they would. And seeing the ship change over time as characters are woken up and then sleep for decades and then woken up and visit each other at different points in their lives because of this is just fantastic. And I would love more books that dealt with colony ships in this way. So if you want a science fiction book that deals with huge timescales, that shows you that creatures that you were once scared of can be empathetic and worthy of respect while still being equally terrifying, Children of Time by Adrian Tchaikovsky is worth a look. At number 7, we have another sort of first contact story, one that is often recommended and also has quite a divisive trope within it, and that is Blind Sight by Peter Watts, here in its duology along with its sequel. This is a uncompromising, hard science fiction story that asks some really poignant questions and some really scary questions about consciousness, the nature of life itself. When a strange object seems to take a picture of Earth, there was one crew that is in position to be sent to check it out. This crew is built up of almost post-humans. Our main character's special ability is the ability to interact with these post-humans and translate the way they act and the way they talk into ways that are human-soluble, in the ways that an average human back on Earth could understand. Competition for these spots is so high that the other spots are filled by these hugely specialized people that have undergone cybernetic, biological, physiological, psychological changes that put them so at odds with normal humanity that without this interpreter, they may just not be understood. Our crews include a linguist, a soldier, a medic, and yes, a vampire. This book often gets kind of looked down on because of its use of vampirism and a vampire character, but I say don't let that stop you. It is explained within the lore why there is a vampire, where they come from, all to do with that. And it really, really works and is a really important part of the story. This group of humans and vampire find themselves in this first contact situation that is unlike anything that mankind could have prepared for. It reveals terrifying possibilities of mankind's evolutionary path, terrifying possibilities of mankind's future, and real questions into the idea of identity and consciousness and society as a whole. It blends neuroscience, evolutionary theory, astrophysics into a narrative that is exciting and, yes, at times difficult to follow. It is not a particularly easy read. It is at times confronting, it is at oftentimes confusing, but it is at the end phenomenally rewarding. Despite asking a lot of its reader, the reward is a book that has lived rent-free in my head and has made me question my own sense of self, my own consciousness and the way my brain works, almost more than any other book. If you, like me, like science fiction that challenges you, challenges your perceptions of things, and may even in the end change the way you think at a core level, then Blind Sight by Peter Watts is a fantastic read. And about as far on the other end of the tonal spectrum as we can get in science fiction, I have Project Hail Mary at number 6. This is a strangely optimistic science fiction book that deals with a possible end of humanity as we know it. Waking up alone on a spaceship in a strange solar system with no memory of what he's doing or how he got there, Ryland Grace finds himself as humanity's last hope to survive, as this spacefaring microorganism appears to be devouring the Earth's sun. Grace, alone, far from humanity, far from any resources apart from those within the spaceship, now has to figure out why he's here, what he's supposed to do, and how he can possibly help humanity from this situation. And it demands every ounce of courage, intelligence, creativity, and even camaraderie that he has left. In a genre that often leans towards the cynical, that often leans towards the negative outcomes, that often shines a negative light on aspects of society. Project Hail Mary comes off as strangely hopeful. The science, the engineering, the wit, the friendship and camaraderie that are on display in this book make me hopeful for humanity, whereas normally science fiction leaves me in a, oh, we're all going to die sort of mood. Andy Weir's way of writing is hopeful and positive in the face of near certain demise. And the science and engineering on display here are a core tenet of the story. We explore this entire book through Ryland Grace's mind. So when presented with a problem, as Grace steps through the problem solving, we're there every step of the way, often allowing the reader to come to the conclusion just moments before the character does, filling you with a sense of relatability to the character, but also this sense of accomplishment and this sense of almost smugness while reading it that is very satisfying. This story could very easily have fallen into a similar vein as Blind Sight, the previous book, in a hard to read, hard to comprehend, hard science fiction story. But Andy Weir's way of writing and the way he steps through the processes means that this is actually probably the most accessible science fiction book I can think of. If you have a friend or a family member who doesn't read science fiction but you think might be interested, this is the book I think would get them into it. I have lent this book to basically every member of my family, and everyone has come away with rave reviews. So if you want a book that is hopeful at times, that is funny, that is exciting and is enjoyable and left me in literal tears, Project Hail Mary. All right, before we jump into the top 5, if you're enjoying this video, if you like science fiction books, if you like fantasy books, Warhammer books or horror books, that's what we do here. That's what we read, that's what we review, that's what we talk about. I'd love if you left a like or a comment, and over 80% of my viewers are still not subscribed to my channel, so even if you think you might be, I would really appreciate it if you hit that button. I'm trying hard to hit 5,000 subscribers this year. Every subscription really helps me hit that goal. And a reminder, if you want to pick up any of these books I'm talking about today, then there will be links in the description below where you can grab them on Amazon and help support the channel out just a little bit. But let's get into the top 5. Coming in at number 5, the inspiration for a movie and then a hit video game. It is Roadside Picnic by Arkady and Boris Strugatsky. This is a hauntingly beautiful story about human greed, the unknowable, and about alien contact that has gone on to influence so many things, including Jeff Vandermeer's Annihilation series. But for me, the game, the movie, the books that inspired, there is no better story of this type than Roadside Picnic. After an extraterrestrial visit leaves these bizarre, anomalous zones in Earth, humanity scrambles to figure out what happened and figure out how they can exploit it. These zones have strange anomalies within them, strange gravitational vortexes, odd electrical discharges. Things happen in these zones that are unexplainable. People go in and never come out. People go in and come back vastly changed, but also within them are alien relics. For example, infinite batteries and technology beyond what we understand. Weird items that act in ways that our understanding of physics says is impossible. And so these zones have almost all been locked down. We follow Red, who is known as a stalker. He illegally ventures into the zone to retrieve relics and items in an attempt to sell them to make a living. But the real story here isn't about aliens, isn't even about the relics and stuff they left behind. It's about mankind. It's about mankind trying to come to terms with what's happened. It's about humanity's inability to put aside greed. And it's about our inability to understand the truly alien. Rather than featuring big climactic battles or duels between aliens and humans, Roadside Picnic captures this eerie, unknowable sense that follows this contact. It's this landscape this leftover landscape full of unknowable things is just as much of a character as anyone else in the book, and it feels alive. It feels hostile and entirely indifferent to human beings. I love how Roadside Picnic refuses to explain itself. I love how it highlights aspects of humanity that we may not want to or may not be ready to confront within ourselves. And I love the way that it leaves you baffled at times in the way that a truly alien encounter would leave you. If you like science fiction that's unsettling, confusing at times, but deeply emotional, then Roadside Picnic is fantastic. In number 4 is another book that is confusing at times, is another book that doesn't explain itself, is another book that leaves you questioning reality, and it is Philip K. Dick's 𝕬𝕝. Set in a future where psychics exist, we are in a world where psychics and counter-psychics are at the core of corporate espionage. We follow one group working in this corporate espionage when, due to events dealing with psychic phenomenon, they find themselves in a weird reality. In a reality that appears to be regressing in time, in a reality where there are time anomalies taking place and mysterious forces are at play. Meanwhile, there are adverts for this product known as 𝕬𝕝 that seems to offer salvation, confusion, hope. The questions at the core of this are, what is going on? Are they alive? What is reality? What's happened in this book is a constant question that may not even be answered adequately by the end of it. 𝕬𝕝 is funny, it is creepy, it is emotional, it is incredibly intelligent, it is deep, and it forces you to question assumptions about the nature of reality itself. And for my money, is the best mess with your mind sort of book that exists. When I made my top 10 list last year, this was my number 1 science fiction novel. Since then, I have read 2 books that I enjoyed more, but it is still very dear to my heart, one of my favorite books of all time, and it is Rendezvous with Rama by Arthur C. Clarke. Rendezvous with Rama is one of the most mysterious and awe-inspiring works of exploration fiction that I've ever read. When a massive cylindrical object enters the solar system, an expedition is launched from the only crew that is within range to intercept and explore this object, as it appears to be of alien origin. What they find is this essentially alien craft that is both entirely empty and full of signs of intelligence and life. And what we get is this exploration of an object, of a terrain, of an area that is completely indifferent to humans. Nailing the sense of wonder of some older science fiction and fantasy books, Arthur C. Clarke's Rendezvous with Rama isn't about giant laser battles in space, isn't about launching shoulder-mounted rocket launchers at aliens. It's about this staggering, humbling realization that humanity is small and insignificant in the grand scheme of things. Asking questions of the titular Rama of who built it, what's it doing here, why us, and what's it going to do when it reaches its destination. The book captures this pure science fiction awe in me that I haven't seen in another book. This is, in my opinion, the best of the big dumb object books that I've ever read. It feels like peeking behind the curtain at this other universe that exists, but doesn't care too much to introduce itself to us. Figuring out number 1 and number 2 this year was very, very difficult. Both of these books are near and dear to my heart as some of the best ones I've ever read, but coming in at number 2 is William Gibson's ℚ𝕚𝕚𝕚. The cyberpunk novel that changed the genre, that gave us the language of cyberpunk. Set in a world that today we recognize as cyberpunk, this is the book that came up with a lot of those concepts. Set in a world full of corporations that rule over everybody, full of technology beyond the wildest dreams of someone in the 80s. We follow a washed-up hacker known as Case, as he basically attempts to drink and drug himself into an early grave. But given a chance to return to his previous life of hacking, Case agrees to one last job, one that is beyond the scope of anything he could have imagined, one that has him dealing with team members he doesn't know in mysterious organizations across the globe. We follow Case and this journey as we travel through many different areas, not only on Earth, but also in orbit, as they attempt to deal with this neon world of cyberspace, this physical decay of his own being, the dangerous and confusing relationships he has with his other team members as they struggle to accomplish a task that is Herculean in nature. Gibson practically invented the language of cyberpunk as we know it. Terms like cyberspace, terms like the Matrix, come from this book, come from William Gibson. We owe a lot of what modern cyberpunk is to works like ℚ𝕚𝕚𝕚, the gritty, dark reality of life under corporate thumb, the sleek, dangerous nature of the technology. ℚ𝕚𝕚𝕚 is at times eerily prophetic while also being just intensely engaging. One of my favorite things about ℚ𝕚𝕚𝕚 is something that turns a lot of other people off, and that is that it doesn't take time to explain things to you. ℚ𝕚𝕚𝕚 isn't going to explain the jargon or the technology it uses to you in the same way that a general fiction author isn't going to explain what a car or a mobile phone is. I almost feel like ℚ𝕚𝕚𝕚 is written as a book for people that live within this universe, so they don't need those things explained. And while that can at times be challenging, it leads to a sense of immersion that is almost untouched in other science fiction works that I've read. So if you love gritty science fiction full of hackers, cyberspace, artificial intelligence, endless intrigue, ℚ𝕚𝕚𝕚 is a foundational masterpiece of science fiction. And taking the top spot is a book that might not be too surprising. Dune by Frank Herbert is in lots of people's top science fiction books of all time, and I adore that book. However, I think Dune Messiah is even better. The profound, brutal sequel to Frank Herbert's Dune is, I think, one of the boldest sequels ever written. Set 12 years after the event of Dune, we try and ask the question of what happens when the Chosen One wins? What happens after that point? Burdened by rebellions, prophecy, religions, unintended consequences of its own myth, struggling against forces spiritual and political within the Empire, Dune Messiah dismantles the Chosen One trope and asks the question of, okay, but what now? Dune Messiah doesn't glorify the events of Dune. Dune Messiah looks back on the events of Dune and says, you thought Paul was a hero in this book. I don't think you were reading it correctly. Here's the truth of what's going on. Dune Messiah meditates on power, on destiny, on loss, and shows the inevitable tragedy of following this almost messiah figure, of following the Chosen One. It asks, what did Paul ever do to deserve this future? What did he do to deserve this destiny? And why does everyone see him as this worship-worthy hero figure? When you really look into the events that took place and what he's done, is he not maybe the villain of the story? I chose Dune Messiah as my number one because it is one of the most powerful sequels I've ever read. Not many books can manage to time travel in the way that Dune Messiah does. I finished Dune and my perception of the story was locked concrete tight in my head. And then I read Dune Messiah and it just flipped it. When I look back on Dune now, I don't see the same story I did before. I see a very different story with a very different reading. And that's due to the power of this sequel and the power of the poetic nature of the prose and the vivid descriptions of the characters and their actions. It proves that victory may not be the end goal. It proves that victory comes at a cost, and sometimes those costs can be greater than you're willing to pay. If you've read Dune and you haven't read Dune Messiah, I think it is essential reading. Is my favorite science fiction book of all time, and I'm sure some people in the comments are going to yell at me about that. Thank you so much for watching, if you still are. Which of these books have you read? Do you like them as much as I did? Do you like them more than I did? Are there any science fiction books you feel it is criminal that I've left off this list? Let me know about them below, and I will either add them to my TBR list or have a discussion with you about why they just quite didn't make the grade. I could have very easily made this a top 30, a top 50 list, but cutting it down to 15 was about as much as I could have managed. So drop your thoughts in the comments below, hit the like button if you enjoyed the video, and don't forget to subscribe if you enjoy fantasy, Warhammer, science fiction, horror, any of that sort of thing. And please remember to keep reading. Ciao.